History remembers legendary female warriors like Tomoe Gozen, but in the last bloody days of the samurai, when a whole way of life was going up in flames, the most ferocious charge against the new emperor's modern army wasn't led by some famous general. It was led by a teenage girl you've probably never heard of. Her name was Nakano Takeko. This is the story of her unbelievable last stand and how the world tried to erase her from history. Picture this. The year is 1868. Japan is a country literally tearing itself apart. For 700 years, the samurai had been the undisputed ruling class, their lives built on a strict code of honor and loyalty to their feudal lords, the daimyo, and the top military dictator, the shogun. But that world was coming to a screeching halt. After 2 centuries of keeping the rest of the world out, foreign ships showed up demanding Japan open its borders. This sparked a revolution. A powerful movement rose up to kick out the shogun, restore the emperor to absolute power, and modernize Japan to compete with the West. This blew up into a brutal civil war, the Boshin War. It was old versus new, tradition versus progress, the katana versus the rifle. At the heart of the resistance was the Aizu domain, a rugged mountainous region in northern Japan. The Aizu samurai were legendary for their fighting skills and their hardcore loyalty to the Tokugawa shogunate. To them, the emperor's forces weren't restoring order. They were rebels destroying the soul of Japan. They decided to fight to the very last man. Living in this pressure cooker of tradition and impending doom was a young woman named Nakano Takeko. Born in the shogun's capital, Edo, in 1847, she was the daughter of a high-ranking Aizu official. From day one, Takeko wasn't like the other girls. While most women of her class were trained to be good wives and mothers, Takeko was being groomed for a fight. Her father, Nakano Heine, made sure she got a tough education, not just in books and art, but in the martial arts. She was sent to train with the master martial artist Akaoka Daisuke, who immediately saw she was a prodigy. She mastered the naginata, a long pole with a curved blade at the end. This was the weapon of choice for female warriors, known as onabogeisha, because it let a smaller fighter keep stronger, sword-swinging opponents at a distance. Takeko was a force of nature. She was smart, disciplined, and fiercely independent. When her adoptive father tried to arrange a marriage for her, she flat out refused and went back to her family. A bold move in a deeply patriarchal society. By the time the Boshin War started, she had moved to Aizu and was already a respected figure, teaching the naginata to other women and kids at the local castle. As the imperial army, with its modern rifles and cannons, marched north, Aizu became the final stronghold of the old samurai world. They knew they were outnumbered and outgunned. They knew this was a fight they probably wouldn't survive. But for an Aizu samurai, surrender just wasn't in their vocabulary. And for Nakano Takeko, there was no way she was just going to sit and watch. Now, before we dive into the charge that made Nakano Takeko a legend, a quick heads up. If you find deep dives into history like this relaxing, and need something to help you sleep, go check out my bedtime stories, the long 6 hours rest playlist. You can find the link up above. Let's drift back to that autumn of 1868. Things were looking grim and carried a heavy silence over Aizu. The imperial forces had crushed everyone in their path and were closing in on Aizu for the final battle. Inside Aizu Wakamatsu Castle, the men were getting ready for the fight of their lives. Samurai sharpened their swords, and even teenage boys from the White Tiger Company pledged to die for their lord. But the women? They were ordered to stay behind. Their job was to patch up the wounded, cook, and if the castle fell, to take their own lives to avoid being captured. That was the code. Nakano Takeko wasn't having any of it. She had spent her whole life training for this exact moment. Being told she couldn't defend her home just because she was a woman was a massive insult to her honor. Furious, Takeko went to the Aizu commanders and begged them to let women fight. They said no. Women weren't allowed to be an official part of the army. So Nakano Takeko made a decision that would echo through history. If she couldn't join their army, she'd make her own. She rounded up about 20 other women who, like her, were skilled with the naginata and refused to sit on the sidelines. This impromptu unit even included her own mother, Kako, and her teenage sister, Yuko. They weren't officially sanctioned, had no rank, but they had a mission. They called themselves the Joshitai, the women's army. Dressed in traditional hakama pants with white headbands signaling their resolve, they took their positions, an independent force ready to fight for their home. Their moment came on October 16, 1868. As the imperial army advanced, They reached a small bridge called the Anagi Bridge. This is where Nakano Takeko and the Joshitai made their stand. In a stunning display of pure guts, Takeko led her small band of women in a full-blown charge straight at the imperial troops. The enemy soldiers were completely shocked. They were armed with modern rifles, but as they took aim, they realized they were facing women. For a split second, there was confusion, and their commander reportedly ordered his men not to fire on them. That hesitation was a fatal mistake. The Joshitai slammed into their lines. In close combat, their naginatas were devastatingly effective, and the women cut down several soldiers before the enemy could even react. Nakano Takeko herself was a whirlwind of destruction, personally killing 5 or 6 enemy combatants. For one brief, glorious moment, the impossible was happening. A small band of female warriors had thrown the modern imperial army into total chaos. But that moment couldn't last. The difference in technology was just too great. The stunned imperial commander took back his order. The sharp crack of rifle fire echoed across the bridge. As the Joshitai fought on with desperate fury, a bullet tore through the air and hit Nakano Takeko straight in the chest. She fell, mortally wounded. The charge was broken. The battle for the Yanagi Bridge was lost. But even as she was dying, Takeko was a samurai to the core. Back then, the greatest shame for a warrior was to have their head taken by the enemy as a trophy. It was the ultimate symbol of defeat. Lying on the ground, Takeko knew she only had moments left. She had one last order. She looked at her sister, Yuko, and made an agonizing request. Cut off her head so the enemy couldn't take it as a prize. With unbearable grief, her sister did what she asked, preserving Takeko's honor as a warrior. While the battle still raged, Yuko took her sister's head and escaped. She carried it to the nearby Hokai temple, where a priest buried it with honor under a pine tree. Nakano Takeko, the 21-year-old commander of the women's army, was laid to rest not as a victim, but as the samurai she always was. The battle for Aizu dragged on for another month. The remaining members of the Joshitai fell back to Suruga Castle and kept fighting, but the end was inevitable. Finally, facing overwhelming numbers and constant cannon fire, the Aizu domain surrendered on November 6, 1868. The samurai class was officially abolished, and the age of the warrior was over. You would think this incredible story would be famous, right? Well, for a long time, it wasn't. The story of Nakano Takeko and the Joshitai became an inconvenient footnote, a story written out by the winners. The new Meiji government was focused on creating a unified modern Japan, and tales of old guard loyalists, especially female warriors who defied the new system, didn't really fit the brand. The legend of the Onabu geisha was mostly scrubbed from official history, replaced with a quieter, more domestic role for women. But you can't just erase a legend like that. In Aizu, the memory of Nakano Takeko never died. A monument was eventually built at her gravesite in the Hokai temple, a project pushed forward by a Navy admiral who was from Aizu himself. Today, her legacy is celebrated. During the annual Aizu Autumn Festival, a procession of young girls marched in her honor, dressed in hakama, and white headbands, carrying replica naginatas to remember the brave actions of the Joshitai. She's remembered as one of the last true female samurai, a symbol of courage and defiance against impossible odds. Nakano Takeko's story is more than just a forgotten battle. It's a powerful reminder that history isn't as simple as we're often told. It shatters the image of the quiet, obedient woman in feudal Japan and proves that warriors came in all shapes and sizes. Hers is a story of loyalty, defiance, and the unbreakable will of a young woman who refused to be a bystander to her own fate. She raised an army, led a charge, and died a samurai's death, leaving behind a legend that refuses to be forgotten. If you're into stories of forgotten heroes and hidden histories, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. For more stories about incredible women who changed history, be sure to check out our playlist on the topic. Let us know in the comments what other historical figures you think we should cover next. Thanks for watching.